Evil today has perfectly disguised itself under a cloak of stupidity. And as comedian Carlos Mencia said, "The problem with the world is there's too many stupid people and nobody to eat them." So the equation here is dangerous. The more the number of stupid people, the more evil there will be. And one evil among them is the kind that causes wars. There are levels of stupidity, and one of them, an extreme level, is what is causing many modern wars today, which I am going to discuss in depth. So let's get into it. At the first level of malicious stupidity, people fail to question simple assumptions. Everyday ignorance and apathy slowly create a breeding ground for conflict. Many people never stop to question the official story or confront uncomfortable truths. Instead, they remain inside their comfort zones, refusing to learn, refusing to think critically, and in doing so, they unknowingly help spread and sustain lies. As Ray Bradbury once put it, not knowing or refusing to know is bad. When ordinary citizens turn a blind eye to injustice or war propaganda, they become passive accomplices in the very systems they should be questioning. One of the most dangerous aspects of this level of stupidity is the rise of closed minds and echo chambers. People often repeat slogans, narratives, and political catchphrases without ever reflecting on what they actually mean. In this way, ideas stop being examined and simply start being echoed. The German theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer warned about this phenomenon when he wrote, "A stupid person is under a spell, blinded, misused, and abused in his very being. Having thus become a mindless tool, the stupid person will also be capable of any evil and at the same time incapable of seeing that it is evil." When lies are repeated enough times, individuals can slowly transform into automata who unknowingly contribute to harm without ever realizing it. Another common feature of this level is the refusal to face inconvenient facts. When information threatens someone's beliefs or identity, many people instinctively reject it. In times of tension or conflict, this behavior becomes even more dangerous. Aldous Huxley captured this perfectly when he wrote, "Facts do not cease to exist because they are ignored. And yet ignorance often feels easier. It provides a false sense of stability and comfort. But this comfort is fragile. As Bradbury also observed, you can't act if you don't know. When entire societies ignore warnings, dismiss evidence, or blindly accept propaganda, such as downplaying an aggressor's intentions or believing official narratives without scrutiny, they unknowingly prepare the stage for catastrophe." At this level, stupidity is also fueled by naivety and gullibility. Most people assume the world is simpler than it really is. Bradbury captured this human weakness beautifully. "The first thing you learn in life is you're a fool. The last thing you learn in life is you're the same fool." This line reminds us that foolishness is something no one completely escapes. People often believe they understand the world better than they actually do. And when charismatic leaders or demagogues offer simple answers to complicated problems, the naive masses often accept them without hesitation. Without critical thinking, even a small rumor, a misunderstanding, or a piece of propaganda can quickly turn into hostility and division. The ignorance and complacency at this stage may seem harmless on the surface, but together they create the emotional climate in which wars become possible. They amplify propaganda, normalize hostility, and encourage conflict, all while remaining safely removed from the destruction they help ignite. And then this raises to even a more complex level of malicious stupidity, which I am going to discuss now. At this stage, people do not merely remain ignorant, they begin to embrace delusion and ideology as their guiding light. Ignorance slowly hardens into conviction. The person who once simply consumed propaganda now becomes a passionate believer in it. The fan of propaganda becomes the fanatic of ideology. At this level, individuals consciously ignore facts and willingly accept absurd beliefs that flatter their identity or worldview. This is why Dietrich Bonhoeffer warned that stupidity is a more dangerous enemy of the good than malice. One may protest against evil, but against stupidity we are defenseless. One of the defining features of this level is ideological blindness. People begin to build rigid worldviews, political, religious, or cultural, and any evidence that contradicts those beliefs is simply rejected. Facts no longer matter. Loyalty to the ideology matters more. As Bonhoeffer explained, when facts challenge their worldview, the facts that contradict their story simply need not be believed. In such moments, the stupid person even becomes critical. This creates a strange paradox, where people who reject real evidence suddenly become critical thinkers only when the truth threatens their narrative. Slogans replace reality. Words like glory, victory, or patriotism begin to overshadow truth and complexity. Bonhoeffer illustrated this phenomenon through an observation from his own time. During wartime, those far from the battlefield were often the loudest voices of hatred. He pointed out that soldiers fighting together in the trenches rarely behaved with the same hostility seen in propaganda. In fact, he remarked that while communists fighting side by side did not spit on each other, they left that kind of thing to the journalist in the rear. Another dangerous dimension of this level is what can be described as the social contagion of stupidity. When powerful movements, charismatic leaders, or mass political surges emerge, they often suppress individual reasoning. Bonhoeffer described this almost like a psychological infection spreading through society. Every strong upsurge of power in the public sphere infects a large part of humankind with stupidity. The power of the one needs the stupidity of the other. In other words, leaders who seek control depend heavily on the uncritical loyalty of the masses. And the masses, in turn, often feel empowered by belonging to a large, emotionally charged movement. This creates a dangerous feedback loop. The stronger the movement becomes, the less questioning occurs. The louder the slogans become, the weaker rational thinking grows. People chant in unison, repeat propaganda, and feel emotionally united, while critical thought slowly disappears. Under the influence of intense nationalism, fear, or ideological pride, entire societies can begin marching toward conflict while believing they are acting heroically. Another aspect of this level is blinding pride combined with conspiracy thinking. Many people refuse to accept obvious realities because doing so would damage their identity or sense of superiority. When economies weaken, resources become scarce, or political failures occur, it is often easier to blame outsiders than to confront internal problems. This is why scapegoating becomes so common during times of tension. People begin embracing extreme narratives or conspiratorial beliefs that portray some group as the enemy responsible for all problems. This type of thinking mixes ignorance with self-righteousness. Individuals feel morally superior while spreading misinformation. At level 2, stupidity becomes aggressive, yet it remains deeply oblivious. People are no longer merely uninformed. They actively refuse to become informed. They defend their ignorance with passion and hostility. This makes the situation far more dangerous than simple naivety. Bonhoeffer warned that confronting this kind of stupidity is incredibly difficult because traditional solutions fail. As he wrote, "Neither protests nor the use of force accomplish anything. Reasons fall on deaf ears." When a crowd is completely consumed by ideology and propaganda, logical arguments lose their power. Evidence is dismissed, critics are demonized, and compromise becomes nearly impossible. And then comes the most extreme level of idiocracy, which I am going to discuss now. This level can be called stupidity used as a weapon. At this stage, foolishness becomes openly dangerous. Hatred and delusion fuse together, producing actions that cause enormous harm. In this level, people are not just misinformed or ideologically blinded. They are willing to hurt others because they believe they are serving a simple, distorted cause. The transformation is disturbing. What once appeared as mindless stupidity slowly evolves into willing cruelty. People commit terrible acts without guilt, not because they are consciously malicious, but because they are completely blind to the moral reality of their actions. One of the clearest signs that society has reached this level is when propaganda no longer merely deceives. It begins to incite violence. Lies evolve into weapons. Entire groups of people are demonized, portrayed as monsters, traitors, or enemies of humanity. Once this process begins, brutality becomes easier to justify. Voltaire warned about this danger centuries ago when he wrote, "Certainly, someone who has the power to make you absurd has the power to make you unjust." People begin to see violence as righteous. Destruction starts to appear heroic. If a community convinces itself that a particular group is subhuman, dangerous, or secretly plotting against them, then attacking that group can suddenly appear justified. At this point, stupidity disguises itself as bravery. Ordinary citizens, people who once lived normal lives, can transform into executioners, all while believing they are defending their nation or their people. Another terrifying aspect of this level is what can be called group insanity. When individuals gather in large crowds driven by fear, anger, or ideology, their rational thinking often disappears. The French social psychologist Gustave Le Bon warned about this long ago when he observed that, in crowds, it is stupidity and not mother wit that is accumulated. This chilling statement reveals something deeply unsettling about human nature. A person who might behave rationally alone can become irrational, aggressive, or even violent when absorbed into a crowd. In a mob, personal responsibility fades. The individual disappears into the emotional current of the group. Soldiers on the battlefield may sometimes maintain discipline and clarity, but within cities and societies far from the front lines, mobs can easily encourage each other towards savagery. History repeatedly shows how communities that once lived peacefully together can suddenly turn violent when swept up in collective hysteria. Once this mass stupidity takes hold, it feeds on itself. The more people willing to act blindly, the louder the calls for destruction become. At this level, stupidity also becomes self-destructive. It does not only harm enemies, it ultimately destroys the very societies that embrace it. Bonhoeffer warned that when inconvenient facts threaten the narrative of such movements, they are simply discarded. As he explained, the stupid person even becomes critical, and when facts are irrefutable, they are just pushed aside as inconsequential. Reality itself becomes the enemy. Leaders and movements driven by this mentality often promote policies that are reckless, irrational, and harmful even to their own people. Wars are launched without understanding their consequences. Economies are sacrificed for ideological pride. Bonhoeffer also noted that stupidity leaves behind in human beings at least a sense of unease. This unease often leads societies consumed by stupidity to turn against themselves once the external enemy is no longer enough to satisfy their anger. The same forces that were once directed outward eventually begin to tear the society apart from within. In the end, movements driven by extreme stupidity rarely achieve their grand ambitions. More often, they collapse under the weight of their own contradictions. When people stop questioning the lies they are told, when doubt disappears entirely, violence becomes inevitable. Nearly every senseless war, genocide, or campaign of destruction contains elements of this lethal foolishness. Many soldiers who fight in such conflicts do not truly understand the cause they are dying for. They are trapped within a system of belief that discourages questioning and rewards obedience. As George Orwell once observed, "The soldiers do the fighting, the journalists do the shouting." Even without naming specific countries, the pattern is easy to recognize. When leaders speak the language of reason while secretly pursuing hidden agendas, the result is confusion, mistrust, and chaos. When societies demand obedience instead of open debate, they quietly build pressure beneath the surface. Over time, these forces combine to create a dangerous environment, one where conflict becomes almost inevitable, even if people claim they want peace. One major consequence is the rise of proxy conflicts and endless cycles of tension. In recent decades, many local disputes have been transformed into global struggles. These conflicts are often presented through very simple stories: a noble victim against an evil tyrant, a battle for resources, or a dramatic clash between civilizations. These narratives are easy for people to understand, which is exactly why they are so effective. Simplistic thinking makes complicated geopolitical struggles appear clear and morally obvious. But the reality beneath these stories is far more complex. Multiple powers often manipulate situations for their own strategic advantage, while ordinary people cheer from the sidelines without understanding the deeper dynamics at play. When one country responds with aggressive rhetoric, another responds in kind, and the cycle continues. Each reaction feeds the next, and all too often, no one steps back to question whether the conflict itself is based on misunderstanding, pride, or simple stupidity. Another enormous cost is the economic and human toll that follows. Nations sometimes spend trillions on weapon systems and military expansion, not because a threat is truly imminent, but because fear and suspicion dominate political thinking. It becomes easier to believe in exaggerated enemies than to face difficult choices about cooperation and compromise. This kind of thinking drains national resources that could otherwise improve education, healthcare, infrastructure, and economic stability. The true tragedy of ignorance is that it starves peaceful progress. Entire generations of young people may be sent to fight and die defending abstract slogans created by propaganda. And when war finally arrives, the suffering spreads far beyond the battlefield. The victims are not only the enemy soldiers, they are also the misled fighters who believed the lies, and the civilians who trusted the leaders who deceived them. In this way, stupidity feeds the machinery of war while consuming the very people it claims to protect. Perhaps the most subtle and dangerous cost is the erosion of moral boundaries. Over time, collective foolishness slowly weakens the ethical foundations of society. Actions that once seemed unthinkable begin to appear normal when framed through fear, anger, or revenge. Under the influence of constant propaganda and media frenzy, people gradually become desensitized to violence. Brutality begins to feel routine. Every violent act can be explained away as necessary, defensive, or historically deserved. The longer a society remains trapped in this atmosphere, the more it corrodes its own moral compass. In this sense, stupidity becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. As Gustave Le Bon once observed, "No one is strong enough to do without illusions." When illusions replace reality, even those who wish to do good may struggle to distinguish wisdom from madness.